Welcome back.
Hi.
I'm Yuri with NANO. I'm the CEO and founder of NANO Web Group, a digital agency out in New York City. And I'm back with my favorite senior UX expert, Elaine Mathias. Elaine, welcome. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing great.
Good.
I'm so happy to see you again. Today, Elaine and I will be discussing the importance of user experience.
Yeah.
User experience in general is one of the most important topics, and I believe is the type of topic that hasn't been explored enough, and it's not given enough attention.
Mhm.
And so we need to dive into user experience, why it's important, and then how do you dive into UX and figure out all the problems and solutions.
I think one of the really nice things about user experience is that it's really just a series of like tools and techniques that you can use in almost any circumstance. So once you get kind of familiar with the different approaches of the practice, then you can kind of find different ways to introduce them, whatever project you're working on.
Right. And this goes for web development,
Mhm.
applications, product design, whether it's physical or digital
Mhm.
products, even, just user experience in general, how businesses run,
Mhm.
which user experience plays a big role in customer experience as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, customer experience is really an outgrowth of user experience, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah.
Kind of like in that sweet spot between like user experience and marketing, customer experience emerged. And that's really been interesting to watch over the past 10 years. I think one of the neat things about user experience is that it's a great combination of hard skills and soft skills. So you have people that come from really traditional graphic design or industrial design backgrounds, and they have like a really firm sense of the craft of design. But then user experience also really highlights the roles of like the soft skills, facilitation, collaboration, getting people to feel comfortable in a room and express creativity and vulnerability. And those are really important elements of any kind of innovation or digital transformation project.
Right. I think a major key is that it addresses the foundation,
Mm,
which is the human factor.
yes.
Right? Creating a user experience, the number one foundational piece is
Mhm.
remembering that you're creating the experience for other people.
Yes,
So it's not a
definitely.
matter of what your ego believes. It's not a
Mhm.
matter of what you think is right. It's a matter of what
Yeah.
makes sense and what's good for
Mhm.
your end users.
Yeah, it's very much an outside in approach. If you're not talking to people and really figuring out how they're working and what their needs are and their pain points and experiences, without that kind of data to drive your decisions and sort of shape your perspective on the business, I think it's very difficult to have a product that's going to be widely accepted and really enjoyed and used regularly.
So from your experience, what are some benefits when people do employ user experience practices to improve their products, to improve their
Mhm.
processes? What do they get out of it? Like,
Mhm.
what's the benefit?
So it's kind of twofold, really. You know, we've talked a little bit about like the soft skills around facilitation and collaboration and how those are really elemental to driving a digital transformation. And so I think oftentimes, you know, we overlook the importance of making sure that everybody in the room feels heard and that you're breaking down silos in your organization so that your marketing team and your design team and your e-commerce team, they're all kind of aligned around like we're creating something for the same person, the same type of user. You know, we all have like the same understanding of what the problems are, even though like our different skills might bring different perspectives. You know, a marketing team is probably going to have a slightly different worldview about how marketing and their customer connect versus like the design team and the user. But it's all the same kind of type of person that you're designing for. So I think like being able to align across teams is a really critical part of having a user experience practice. On the sort of outside in approach, you're getting data from real customers, and that's just crucial. I mean, the whole landscape of the internet and digital transformation has really brought this to the forefront, and the most technologically driven companies understand that there's two types of data. You've got the stuff that's coming from data science, the quantitative data, where you've got just massive amounts of information about what people are doing on your platform. But you also need this anecdotal part, the why. Why are people doing this? Why are they clicking in certain ways? And you just can't get that unless you're actually speaking to people. You're going out there, you're having them look at your product. And that can be, on the more formal end, where you have like a user research team, like something you might see at Bloomberg, right? Where you have a really complex technological system. So you need dedicated people with a really specific skill set, to something that's much more low end that you might see more in like the e-commerce space, where you may literally just like walk over to like your customer support team and say like, hey, we're launching a new feature. Can I watch you try and use it? Really simple. That only takes like 15 minutes. You put your phone in their lap, or you do a screen share and send them to a URL where they can like kind of practice it. And then you watch them do it and just ask really simple questions. Like that doesn't cost any money. And it's a really great way to just gather some like basic insights about like whether or not what you're designing is usable, whether it makes sense to people, whether you're getting the copy and like sort of the prompts to move them through the process, whether you're getting all of that right.
Awesome. And generally, how do you get everybody in line? How do you align people? All the thinking heads.
Workshops. You hold lots of workshops. You create places and spaces for play. And workshops are great for that.
What we're here to talk about today, right?
Yeah.
Beautiful. I know you made a really great presentation, so we are very excited to see. So first, give us an intro on what a workshop is, and then walk us through, some of the workshop options that we can exercise.
So, a workshop is really just a place for people to come together. It can be across functional teams. It can be like all teams from one department. It can be people who are all in one space. It can be people, like some people in one space, some people in another space. It can be completely distributed, so everybody's coming in remotely. The tools for running workshops have become so sophisticated in the past couple of years, and there's a really strong skeuomorphic effect where they're built and designed in such a way that they mimic the experience of like a real life in-person workshop. So these tools have become very powerful. And basically what you want to do is you kind of have a person you align on it. Well, first you need to align on a goal, right? So no workshop is effective unless you kind of have an understanding of what everybody is there to do. There's a problem that needs to be solved. And then you bring everybody into the room and you have a facilitator. So somebody who's kind of prepared some exercises, and there are frameworks that person should probably be familiar with, such as like the double diamond approach for like thinking big and then focusing, and then thinking big and then focusing. And you just kind of create places to develop ideas and then to focus those ideas and to kind of figure out like what are the next steps for moving forward. But they're intended to be very playful and creative and just for having fun.
And open-minded.
Yes. Right. Definitely.
So the idea behind workshops is truly to get all the different type of perspectives in a room. Everybody who is trying to do two things: find the root of the problem and then create a solution for that problem. And workshops are phenomenal, which we do them in-house all the time, even just with internal teams, but we also do them with clients where we go out and we bring in the client team with our team and we pinpoint which problem we're trying to solve. We get a lot of perspectives, a lot of ideas. It's very playful and actually you start to uncover a lot of interesting things. So I'm very excited to get into the details.
So I have a little bit of presentation material that I can kind of use to guide the conversation. Hopefully you will see that. So I think that we all can agree right now that digital collaboration is the future of work. Everything has moved online. One of the things that I have seen over the years is digital maturity varies a lot across organizations. So sometimes, you have for example, I worked for a company where a lot of our clients were on the West Coast. And so in that instance, almost everything, since we're based in New York, was happening online. And so we had a really strong internal culture for online work. Like I really never had to tell my boss whether or not I was coming into the office. Like if I decided not to come in, we were probably already chatting online anyway. day. And so it was never really a question of like reporting to him about what my intentions were. When we did video conferences, like the sort of expectation was always that your video was on. We were always using platforms that made it really easy to kind of access the space. You know, it wasn't like you had to have a call-in number or download software every time you wanted to use it. So there was like a really nice sort of culture. And then I shifted to working for a large agency. And at that agency, they didn't have those same tools and expectations. And so it was much more of like a 9 to 5. And if you wanted to work from home, you had to give 24 hours notice. Oftentimes, if you were joining a call remotely, you would have to wait a few minutes after the beginning of the meeting before people would let you into the conference room. And so those sorts of like micro behaviors really impacted the overall culture of the ability to work remotely with other people. And so I think with now that everybody's working from home, you're really seeing a shift towards thinking about like, how do we make these tools and resources and behaviors more accessible to everyone, because we want people to feel heard. And so that's kind of why we're here today, is to like help your organization or any organization out there better understand how they can use digital workshops to, you know, create these remote play spaces and develop ideas when everybody can't necessarily be in the room together. So some of the benefits of a digital workshop, obviously they're online. I've mentioned that the tools have gotten really great. I actually attended a mini conference earlier this week that was run out of Berlin, and they had really accessible breakout rooms. There was sort of a centralized main stage. There was like a global chat, and then there were chat rooms for each breakout room. And it was just really easy to kind of move between the spaces and toggle your video on and off so that you could kind of participate the way that was best for you. And it was like a 3-hour workshop, and it was really engaging for the entire time, even though like I was still kind of multitasking and everything while like responding to emails and planning my day. I was still kind of also participating in this workshop, and I thought that was really neat that they just made it so easy. Having a really strongly structured online workplace also helps people feel like their time is valued. That was the nice thing about this workshop as well, is that it was so well set up. You know, they had like, the schedule was sort of broken up into these like 25 to 40 minute time spans, and everything was really effective. And I felt like coming out of each breakout session that, you know, I had a chance to contribute. We were working in like online documents like Mural and Google Docs to kind of track the information. So it was easy to stay oriented if I got distracted for a minute. So this like structured element also, I think, is really helpful because you can move through a lot of stuff in a really short amount of time. So you can prompt some really effective conversations using things like Mural, using things like digital breakout rooms to kind of help people get their ideas out, but then also see like visual components of that documentation through like digital post-it notes and things like that. And then at the end, you want these workshops to be conclusive, right? Like there should be some sort of path forward, some sort of general sense of like the potential solutions that you're going to move forward with. And so that's kind of also a nice thing about using these like online workspaces, is that you can kind of set up like templates and post-it notes and different like gathering places to document the process. And then at the end, you have all of it right there. It wasn't just like a conversation. It was also like kind of capturing that conversation through the different tools available to you. So we've talked a lot about like how important it is just to like create places for play in the workspace. And I think that's one of like the great benefits when you're stuck on a project, when you're feeling really frustrated with the people around you, when you're maybe a little overwhelmed, you're just not sure how to move forward. You've had the same problem on your back burner for a while. Like a workshop is great because it creates a really like time box place where you can get unstuck, play a little bit, kind of feel creative. My experience with creativity is like, it's a muscle. You have to exercise it. Being creative, if you're not doing it very often, can be very difficult to sort of like build momentum on. It can be very uncomfortable at times. And so workshop is a great way to kind of have somebody who's experienced with running workshops, with helping people feel creative, come along and like run some icebreakers and just make it feel inclusive and engaging. And that's a really critical part of like the workshop experience. The Nielsen Norman Group, which is sort of like a long time, very highly respected online resource for UX designers, highly recommend it if you've never seen it, has kind of broken down workshops into these 5 different categories: discovery, empathy, design, prioritization, and critique. These categories generally sort of follow what's known as like the life cycle of the design process. So almost any design project is going to start with discovery, whether you're designing a poster for a rock concert or new features for an existing app or trying to maybe brainstorm your way into a new market, you're always going to start with discovery. It's really just a fancy word for research. So you want to get people together, kind of figure out what everybody knows, whether it's something about the customer, whether it's something about like whatever their area of expertise is. You want them to talk about that with you, with other people involved in the project, so everybody kind of has an understanding of like why that person is in the room. It's a good way to build consensus. It's a good way to build empathy. Maybe there's somebody on your team that you're kind of always like butting heads with. Having a good conversation at the beginning of a process or a beginning of a project with that person can be a really great way to kind of ground your interactions moving forward, so that you have, you know what to go to them for, like when you need information. That's a great sort of element of the discovery workshop. The next sort of step is, once you've kind of figured out why everybody's in the room, is to do an empathy workshop. That's sort of the next phase of the design life cycle. So with empathy, that's really where you start talking to your customer base. You start talking to your users. You want to figure out either maybe generative information. So like, where are there opportunities? Talking to people who are maybe already like your sense of who the prime customer is, sort of figuring out like how they're already doing a process with existing tools, so you can look for like holes or opportunities in their needs. Or if you have like an existing product, then going out there and running a usability test to kind of figure out like what is their actual lived experience with your product. That's really crucial. An empathy workshop is really just a way to gather data. It's a way to figure out why people are doing what they're doing and sort of have a better understanding of who you're creating for, whether you're designing or you're working on a marketing plan or you're trying to improve your IT processes. All of that is dependent on like how that process or that information is bubbling up to impact the user experience. Once you have a good sense of your user, then you can kind of start the actual design process. And so this is where you're really generating ideas, kind of figuring out how those ideas will manifest themselves in your final product. So if you're doing an e-commerce site and you're kind of trying to figure out like, what is the hook on our homepage that's going to push the customer to the next step of the e-commerce, the next step into conversion, basically. You can use a design workshop to brainstorm a lot of ideas about how that homepage maybe should look, and then kind of start to develop potential solutions to those ideas. Prioritization is a workshop that's a little bit better when you have sort of the ball already moving. So maybe you've got some user information, you've got like a backlog of things that you've been trying to work on, and you're sort of figuring out like, what is the next thing that we need to tackle? Oftentimes what I have found is that what you think is supposed to be the priority maybe isn't the best priority. So it's even like a good chance to gut check whether your perspective on a situation is going to be like the most effective or have the most business value in the next 2 to 6 months, right? You can only do so much in the course of a year. And then lastly is critique. And so that's a good opportunity to kind of take a look at what your product is already doing, or take a look at maybe you have some ideas that are in development, and then you can run a critique workshop to get some feedback on those and improve them.
These workshops, they can be applied to established companies and established businesses, or are they for new efforts only?
Both. Definitely both. So oftentimes with new efforts, you have like lots of big ideas sort of floating around out in the, you're talking to people, you're getting information, and a workshop can ground you. So it's a really great way to kind of develop that path forward, to get that vision sort of centered so that everybody has the same vision, which is really important. Even if it's a very small team, you've never worked together before, you don't quite have a product on the market, you can kind of pull all that stuff out of the air, document the decisions that are happening through the conversations in the workshop, and then sort of figure out how to move forward and what to focus on. obviously focusing, kind of having a lean product approach is really important when you're a new organization. If you're an existing organization, workshops are great through working through some of like the political blocks that come in larger organizations. It's great for breaking down silos. In user experience and information architecture, people talk a lot about siloing in organizations. So you might even have a team that's working on a particular project in a different part of the organization that you could learn from, and you're not even talking to that team because you're like over here. And so I think workshops are great in those situations for getting information that's like floating around the organization into like one place, having conversations with people whose expertise may be very different from yours, and getting a better understanding of the organization so that that user is really at the core of everything that people are doing.
You know, you said something that triggered a thought in my head. When, you know, building workshops and bringing people from different teams is always difficult. Digital workshops will actually simplify this process, right? Bring, you know, people, you could have teams that are participating in the workshops, and then you also have members of the same team that are just listening in, right? And being attentive. So you could actually have a workshop, a webinar of a workshop.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
You can have an audience of how these decisions are being made. Because, and correct me if I'm wrong, generally workshops need to be contained with how many, you know, decision makers are there. And, you know, usually we like to keep it at like 5 to 7 top participants. But usually if you have 7 people in a room, you know, running thoughts and decisions and, you know, running questions, the rest of the companies, the rest of the organizations don't really know how that process is happening. So I think with, you know, with the move into digital, you can actually create an audience, right? A webinar of seeing how the thought process is happening, and potentially, you know, crowdsourced input.
Yeah, it's great for transparency. You know,
absolutely.
you can have like lots of people in the room. I think it breaks down a lot of hierarchical silos as well, because you can use things like dot voting, where everybody's, you know, when you're weighing in on designs or ideas that people have put forward, everybody's vote is equal. So it's a little bit harder. Like when you actually have maybe an executive or a senior team member in the room, people can be very differential. And when you're doing something online, it sort of evens out that playing field a little bit, which I think is really critical for the design process. Executives are super important, of course, like they're great for setting forth the strategy and the vision of the organization, but oftentimes the people who are sort of working on the front lines or at the ground level have really incredible amounts of expertise that's just not being shared widely. And doing an online workshop is a great way to tap into that resource.
Let's make history. Let's change.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I love it. I mean, the best managers I've ever had were people that were my advocates and, you know, soundboards for my ideas and meetings that I wouldn't necessarily have been present in. But, you know, as the interaction designer on a project, like I'm ultimately responsible for like where the buttons are being placed. And sometimes a button can be part of a larger strategic decision, and you want to be able to weigh in on that even if you're not in the room, or you want to be able to have your perspective represented. And so I think that's kind of a nice,
It's super important. Like even, I don't think a lot of stakeholders understand the importance of these micro decisions or macro decisions, because, you know, the designers and the UX people are so close to the product, and, you know, yes, somebody could say it's just a button. What that button is, you know, it's the key to where the user journey takes you further, right? And sometimes, you know, the 2 millimeter rule, right? Moving just by 2 millimeters off, you could make a drastic difference in the user journey. So I definitely agree with you that this type of input is super important. I think, you know, digital collaboration will help us expand on it.
Yeah. And a lot of times too, you're competing with another team for like the same page space, or like you've got multiple priorities happening on a single web page. And so having a workshop around that can help you understand maybe like where the marketing team is coming from or where the IT team is coming from. So you get a better sense of like what the business requirements are. Obviously, as the UX designer, your responsibility is to advocate for the user requirements. Like what is the user's mindset? What are the things that they want to get done on this page? Like, what is this, like a tool for the user to accomplish? How are you creating progress in their life? Even with e-commerce, like people buy things because they have a need, they're trying to get something done, they want to, there's always a motivation there, and it's your responsibility as the user experience designer to represent that motivation in these conversations when you're starting to develop a project. And online workshops are a really great way to come into the room and say, like, I'm representing the user, this is what I think that they, or my research has shown that this particular user is trying to get done. And then you have marketing coming in and they're saying, yes, but also, like, we have this new initiative, we need to spread the word about it. And so you have a really safe, playful space to come up with ideas where you can collaborate and build requirements that will make everybody happy, and you're finding that, like, sweet spot. So we talked a little bit about, like, the life cycle of the design process. So all of these 5 different types of workshops, you know, there's kind of a time and a place and when to use them. And that's something that if you're, you know, wanting us to come in and run a digital workshop, we, in our early conversations about what your goals are, will sort of help you surface of, like, what is the right type of workshop for you? Where are you in this process? So that we can have, like, the most effective outcomes, things that will be really actionable immediately following the workshop, and you'll understand, like, where you're going to be going over the next week or 2 weeks as you move forward with the outcomes that we've sort of developed from the process of, you know, collaboration in this space.
Essentially, when you're doing a big digital transformation, it's great to dive into all 5. So this becomes a full-blown user experience workshop, which you could hit up a lot of sectors. But if you're an established business and you're making incremental changes or incremental improvements, or, you know, smaller projects, you can pick and choose which one you truly need. You know, you don't need to have all 5, but, you know, very often, you know, the discovery and the empathy workshops are huge. The design workshop, you know, are very kind of a, you know, tactical approach, right? When you talk to a strategic team and then you need a tactical approach to a design, that would become, you know, that would come in great. You know, the critique approaches, when, if there is obviously, you know, certain products being released or certain designs being released, that you know, there's disagreements, you know, very often between UX and marketing teams, right? There's disagreement. Everybody's pushing their agenda, so this would be a great for critique. And prioritization is, you know, if you're launching multiple products at the same time or multiple efforts at the same time, you could definitely utilize the prioritization workshop to, you know, to get things in order.
Yeah, exactly. Get everybody on the same page about what you're going to work on next. That's exactly right. You know, these 5 different types of workshops actually align really closely with, like, the Google Design Sprint process. And so if you were doing something like a Google Design Sprint, that's like a Monday through Friday, all day long. You're really, like, grinding for a full week of working through all of these. But it can all be kind of adjusted and curated in such a way that you can cherry pick different components, or you can package it all and do it one day after another, all online for, like, 3 hours in the afternoon. It's one of the wonderful things about design workshops is they're supremely modular. So there's a lot of different ways that you can shape it to meet your needs. And, you know, that's one of the things that Yuri and I are really great at, is that we can kind of come in and have a really simple conversation and then come back and present to, you know, to you what would be the best approach for your particular circumstance. I think the next couple of slides, I dive a little bit deeper into the 5 different types of workshops with, like, some suggestions. So here we kind of dig into, like, a deeper description or definition of a discovery workshop. So you can see here that it's just a great place to curate specific activities that will help your team align on, like, a really common definition or description, figure out exactly what the end point is of the project, and discuss maybe what's not working or what is working well about a current state. So again, you're just really, like, talking to all of the stakeholders on a project to kind of figure out, where are we starting, where are we going, where are we ending. It's a really important time to have those alignment conversations so that you don't get into the middle of a project and start being like, oh, my head's swimming, I'm so overwhelmed. The scope is starting to grow. People are asking for lots of different things. If you've done a really good discovery workshop and it's documented well, you don't have to be the final arbiter. You can point back to that information. You say, no, this isn't in scope. This isn't something we're going to work on right now. because look here, this is what we decided. I have these templates. I have a SWOT analysis. We've already done the hard work to establish a shared vision, and this isn't part of it. So it's a really great kind of way to like establish authority and alignment for a project. And there are lots of different activities that you can do for that. As I mentioned, you can create alignment diagrams, which is basically a map of swim lanes of all the different teams on a project and how their activities sort of boil up to impact the customer experience. You can do a heuristic markup of your existing product or comparative assessment of like competing products, SWOT analyses, RACI charts, project charters. I love establishing like shared values at the beginning of a project. I've often found that when trying to mitigate scope creep later on, it's a really great way to kind of go back and be like, well, we decided at the beginning of a project that this particular value was paramount. And so I'm, trying to make decisions around that. And can you explain how your request here fits into that? And then you can have a conversation with people and try and help bring them around. Or they can convince you maybe what they're asking for actually does fit into the value and you just didn't see that at first. So it's kind of a great grounding tool. Some of the top potential topics for a discovery workshop, again, establishing UX guidelines or establishing project guidelines, opening conversations with your stakeholders, technical complexity. That's another great place to have a discovery workshop, because if you don't really understand what your IT team is doing and what their systems look like, then you're going to really run into some problems when you get to the design phase. So uncovering complexity is really critical. The earlier, the better. Reorienting priorities, and then doing a heuristic analysis and kind of looking at like what are the standards that we're working with, and how does our existing site or how do our competitors' sites live up to those standards? So you can kind of figure out like a quick look in e-commerce is a great example. Like that's obviously an expected feature now. It wasn't always. And so doing heuristic analysis can kind of help you figure out like what are the things that other sites are starting to implement that maybe we want to go ahead and invest in, so we don't have to do it in a year or 2 years. We can be kind of on the front lines of whatever that feature is.
Particularly in e-commerce, usually there are very large appetites and people want a lot of features, and they obviously want to serve the clients as much as they can in the best way they can. Discovery workshops help really well to figure out the must-haves versus nice-to-haves in a product, right? And you were mentioning certain features that became a must-haves today, right? You have to have certain features for people that people recognize and they utilize. But a lot of times, we run into projects where clients saw some funky feature on another website and it feels great, or it seems like it's such a cool feature. Later on to find out that it was a poor investment because the users aren't really utilizing it. A great example I could give you, we many years back, we worked on a project with Hellsberg Diamonds, which is it's a huge retailer in a luxury industry, and silver beads became a big thing back then. And so they wanted to build a silver bead builder where you could customize and build your own bracelets. And we spent 4 months designing it, building it, perfecting it, making it work on every outdated browser. And mind you, the technology wasn't quite there yet. So we were pushing the envelope and then integrated with the e-commerce to later on learn that their pre-made designer bracelets that were put together by professional, jewelry designers were outselling 10 to 1 for the custom bracelets. Simply because people are not, they're not artistic, they're not creative. Yes, it's good to know that you have the option to build your own thing, but very often it just fails because people want to buy the beauty, something that someone who professionally thought it through and just gave you the final product. So this was kind of a point for us where we started to really advise our customers that sometimes features look cool, but doesn't mean that they will work. So discovery workshops really help figure these type of case scenarios out.
Yes, they do. I've also found that those customization features can be quite buggy, and that's often a real deterrent. Like if you get into the customization module and it's not working the way you expect it to, it can be very frustrating, especially on mobile. I've seen some really genuine efforts to make those work, and it's just not the way you want your brand represented. And so having a discovery workshop, running that competitive analysis where everybody's going and they're saying like, we're going to look at these competitors customization modules, and maybe we found some over here and like, you know, make suiting or something that's also similar. You can kind of break it down and start to figure out what the patterns are, and then you see what's working and what's not working. You also sort of brought up like what the customer actually wants, and that's a great segue into an empathy workshop, because if you're not talking to the customer, you're not going to know that. You're not going to know that they actually really value that curated, customized, expert product. And so you might be making assumptions like, oh, these customization modules are cool, everybody's starting to implement them, we better make the investment. But then you might start to see that you don't need to make the investment because you've already got these people on staff, these, you know, wonderful jewelers who are able to create customized products, and you can sell them in a slightly more mass marketed way. And you can also create a lot of copy around that, like really promoting the designers. I think Tiffany's has done a great job with that, with like the Paloma Picasso collection. You know, you add a lot of value by putting a name to it. Even, I mean, obviously Paloma Picasso has quite a famous name, but even, you know, you even spotlighting the people behind the scenes that are doing the work is a really great way to build a connection, a really personal connection. And so an empathy workshop would uncover that for you, to be perfectly honest.
And I think it's very, at this point, it's very valuable to remember what is user experience.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you have to understand, like you mentioned something, things breaking on mobile.
Mm-hmm.
Brands are fighting for attention, right? Consumer attention. It's swamped where everyone is getting hit and everybody's, battling to get our attention. Once you got my attention, the last thing you want to do is frustration, piss me off, or disappoint me, right? And I think majority of the problems with user experience falls into disappointments and frustration.
Yeah.
And this is where empathy workshops, really work, is that you can test certain, hypotheses, you can test certain concepts and ideas with real people, with real users, before you start to mass market and open it up to, to all your customers.
Yeah.
And so I can't stress enough how, how much effort people need to put in not to disappoint their customers.
Yeah. And you're honestly, like, you're not going to know that unless you're asking your customers to look at your product. Like the observational element of an empathy workshop is just so crucial. If that's not part of your design, like you literally cannot be a digital business in this day and age if you don't have a culture of talking to your customers. And part of that culture is having like established processes internally so that you're sharing that information. People are taking it seriously. They believe in the research methodologies that you're using. I mean, design research is a real long existing element of the practice of the craft of design. Like if you do design school, you're going to learn design research. You can do master's programs in design research. And so understanding the people behind the product, the people that you're building for, is you just can't do it without actually putting it in front of a customer. So some different types of empathy workshops. We've talked a little bit about like how you share the information internally. And so what I usually see in when a workshop like this is necessary is that there's probably already some research that's happening. Like you have search analytics, you are able to get transcripts from your customer support team. Maybe, you've gone out and asked your mom to test out whatever design you're working on. So you've got kind of some sort of data about what your customer is doing with your product, and you need to make sense of it. So there's a huge element of sense making that comes along with a lot of these activities. Personas are probably the most common type of outcome of an empathy workshop. They're fairly controversial in terms of like, do people use them? How accurate are they? demographic data people kind of will take seriously and not take seriously. But I think pain points, challenges, needs, all of the information that's kind of included in a persona, if you don't have it documented somewhere, it's not useful. You can also, there have started to emerge like a lot of variations on persona. So like a jobs to be done profile, where you're focusing on like what job is your platform or your product designed to solve for? How are you helping people get something done? You can write job stories. You can create a job map to kind of understand the landscape in which people are interacting with your product to achieve something to progress forward in their lives. Empathy maps, experience mapping, service delivery. So where you're looking at the entire ecosystem of what you're delivering, and then the touch point, the touch points, like documenting those touch points of what's like, how are they coming to your site? How are they interacting with your product description page? What is the checkout experience like for them? All of these sorts of mapping elements can kind of help you understand, like, where do we really need our product to be most effective, right? A frustrating checkout is a terrible place to lose a customer. And so if you're not talking to the customers, if you're not looking closely at how your checkout is working, then you are probably losing customers, almost certainly. And then the same with even just from a planning perspective, if you want a more formalized process, if you aren't doing this at all, and you want to introduce more research, we can help workshop ways and brainstorm ideas where you can have, something a little bit more formal, where people are taking the work more seriously. And then same with user scenarios, user stories, developing documentation during the design phase that then can feed into the agile system that your IT team or your development team is working with. So you can kind of have that shared documentation across both parts of the organization. So then once you sort of have a really strong sense of your user, as I mentioned, you really can't be a digital or technology business without that component of your business being in place. Then you can start talking about like the big ideas. What are we building? What do we want to do? How are these things sort of manifesting in like the making part of the business process? There's always like that making element. So design workshops are what you would sort of tap into there. You want a place where people can brainstorm and present ideas based on like their experiences or their knowledge that can be shared and talked about. And sometimes those ideas can be wild and crazy out of left field. And then other times they might be the most practical idea that people have just overlooked because they've gotten so far down a different path. And so you kind of want to surface that stuff in a really documented and formal way so that you can categorize, capture, and then focus. A really big part of the ideation and brainstorming part is going big and then coming back in and saying, okay, now we want to narrow these ideas down and balance them against like technology constraints or business constraints and kind of figure out like, how can we still be creative and how can we still represent the user, but also do it in a way that makes sense for our business or is scoped in such a way that we're not putting expectations out there that just aren't realistic as we start to develop the product. And so design workshops are really useful for that. It's also really useful sometimes for bringing in non-designers to participate in the process. So oftentimes when I run design workshops, I like it when our front-end developers are in the room. I like it when the tech leads are in the room because they really know a lot. And so having them participate in the design process can help them feel a much stronger sense of ownership once they start the building phase. And then when they run into constraints or they run into problems and there's already that existing dialogue around like how we got to this decision, they can come back to you as the designer and say, I'm kind of stuck here, even though we talked about doing it this one way, like, let's come up with some new ideas to solve this problem. And that's really important. I know as a designer, I don't really love it when developers start changing my designs and making decisions in the face of technological constraints that I wasn't aware of when I was doing my design. And so I think having workshops can be a really great way to to just facilitate that co-creation so that people's toes aren't getting stepped on. And so there are lots of different activities that you can kind of do as part of this. There's usually a lot of like sketching involved, so kind of representing or even modeling ideas so that you're kind of just moving rapidly and developing a lot of ideas really quickly. I think sometimes it makes people a little bit nervous to do some of this stuff, but I have unilaterally always had great experiences getting people to sketch and draw and represent their ideas in a way that brings it out of their head and puts it down on paper, puts it in a way that people can share. Even doing something like a sailboat exercise, which kind of is about like you have like a drawing of like a big sailboat, and then you talk a little bit about like the things that are pushing you forward, like that's the wind and the sails, and then you talk about the things that are holding you back, and that's like the anchor of the boat. And so just getting those two competing things out on the page and brainstorming around it, you can really start to see and understand like why maybe people are pushing so hard in one direction, whereas people are, kind of putting up walls in another area. And then also it's a great way to kind of introduce new design skills into the organization as well. So things like building a pattern library, introducing skills like prototyping, service design, augmented reality. Those are all kind of fun way, like a design workshop is a fun way to kind of say like, if we were going to introduce an augmented reality component to our e-commerce app, what might that look like? And then you come up with really fun ideas like H&M has a color matching. So you could take a picture of a color that you see out in the wild that you like, and they'll show you all the products on their site in that color. I think that's pretty cool. I think it's First Dibs, the furniture design site. They have an app, in their app, a feature where if you find something that you like, you can point your phone at the space where you would put the product and it'll show you what it looks like. So if you have a pillow and you point the phone at your couch, you can see what the pillow looks like on your couch. And like, that's kind of neat. I think that's a really great way to keep people engaged, keep them opening up your app, and then ultimately lead to conversion when they are ready to buy.
Right. One of our clients who's an art gallery, they have an AR component where you can literally point at your wall and see what the artwork will look like on the wall.
Yeah.
IKEA also did a phenomenal job with their furniture placement in a room. And I think, and honestly, I'm glad you bring up AR. AR is definitely one of those components that the technology hasn't quite caught up yet, but it's
coming.
Very
Yeah.
future. And
totally.
People need to start thinking about digital experience in a three-dimensional world now.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and it's in that point, like this is where design workshop would be great because a lot of people are just not familiar, right? There's the law of diffusion of innovation, right? The innovators know about the AR features, but we don't have the large majority that understands it yet.
Yeah.
So we need to educate the stakeholders. We need to educate the team members of the options, abilities, possibilities, and benefits, right? Because you have to decide whether AR is good for your company, if it's useful or not. For example, for jewelry companies, right? A lot of jewelry companies were one of the first ones to jump on doing augmented reality. But because jewelry is not bought so frequently, people wouldn't download the apps. So it was kind of a fluke, right? It's great for in-store if you're in retail and you could use technology to augment your catalogs, right, as a salesperson and help the customer see things and you can utilize it. But from a mobile standpoint, it was kind of a failure because people weren't really using the app so frequently, no matter how cool it is, right? This is the must-have versus nice-to-have type of a feature as well. On the other hand, you have furniture companies, you have other companies that are using AR really well. And so it's definitely a topic of discussion that people should start thinking about very heavily. Simply because, when 5G networks kick in, they will allow augmented reality to run in your mobile phones without having to be an app. You'll be able to utilize the 5G network to, build, so AR, for those that don't know, or augmented reality, consumes a lot of resources and it consumes a lot of data in order to produce a 3D environment. And so in order for it to work today, the AR experience needs to run within a mobile app. When 5G networks start to expand, you'll be able to get that same experience within your mobile website. And so that's when a lot of change will happen. That's when e-commerce is going to level up to a completely different plane. So something to consider in your next design workshop is, do you need AR? When should you prepare for it? And how to integrate it? And to your point, Elaine, this is where a techie would be a great person to have, a developer in a workshop to answer these technical questions, because designers are probably not going to know the answer to that.
Yeah, they're not, for sure. You learn a lot in those circumstances. I love working with developers because I just learned so much about the complexity of what's going on behind the scenes. And then the more knowledgeable I am, the earlier into the process we can bring those requirements and have discussions about how my wireframes and my documentation can better situate them, so that when I'm handing that stuff off to the developers, their language is already embedded in what I've written down or what I've designed. In e-commerce, one of the things that you touched on is like context is everything in an omni-channel world. Like people aren't just like in these silos kind of sitting in front of their computer shopping and then closing their computer and then getting in their car and driving to their store. People are shopping all the time. They're having conversations over brunch. They're on their phones inside your store. They're on your phones maybe inside of a pop-up shop at a different store where you've got products. And so there's just all this kind of this churn happening. And if you aren't doing the heavy lifting to kind of figure out like where your customers are when they're interacting with your brand or your product, then you're not going to be able to design solutions for them that are there to kind of meet those needs or improve on those experiences.
One thing, can I just add one more thing to the design workshop? And I think this is critical, much like augmented reality. Artificial intelligence is starting to play a major role in how data is being used and how we create digital experiences. And so you see, we saw an introduction over the past few years of chatbots, which unfortunately failed miserably. But now you have the reintroduction of that technology in a more of an interactive user experience, right? So you have UI that kind of communicates with you, and it asks you questions, and it guides you, through different journeys, and it's becoming a lot more dynamic. The experience. And so in the design workshops, which I think like as e-commerce, for example, is becoming incredibly crowded today, right? Before, nobody knew what e-commerce was. Now everybody knows what e-commerce is. Everybody's got a website, but now since it became so crowded, the experiences are starting to look bland. And so personalization is starting to be that next level. And how do you personalize a user experience? And that's with help of machine learning and natural language processing and artificial intelligence tools, where you could blend the visual experience with data and with interaction. And artificial intelligence will help us create these experiences. And it's in such an infancy, such a baby stage that you will see in the next couple of years a drastic boom in different user experiences. And so even if you have a well-established brand and if you have a well-established e-commerce presence, you have to consider what happens next. And it's good to have design workshops to do a kind of a check-in, right? How do we push the envelope? Where do we go next? What is our next opportunity that we can look into? And you could have an opportunity with AR, you have an opportunity with AI, you have an opportunity with both of them potentially. So, emerging technology also gets strong consideration during the design workshops, because that's when designers can start pushing their envelope. Designers have creativity. They need to know if the technology can keep up. This is when you have the members, the developers join the team, and that's when creativity really pushes the the design. And I think I think that's where magic happens. This is where certain companies, tend to emerge, right? And
Yes.
if you think back when e-com was just kind of getting out there, somebody like
Yeah.
Warby Parker came on board
Mm-hmm.
and
Oh,
decided
yeah.
that, you could try on glasses on, with taking a picture, and the people was just mind blown.
Yeah.
Something like Blue Nile came on board 18 years ago and brought a diamond search.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that experience hasn't changed since, but it is what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, design workshops give us that opportunity to push the
Yeah.
envelope, to really push the into the next stage of experience.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, you have to have a playful, creative space if you want that magic to happen. Like, it's just not, if everybody's going about their business, doing their job day to day, like, the magic isn't going to spark in the same way. Like, it's just not.
And look,
um,
in reality, the truth of the matter is, right now, digital seems to be the only option.
mhm.
So how do you
Yeah.
create the retail-like experience, or
Mhm.
close as possible,
Mhm.
online,
Yeah.
right?
Totally.
And it's not like there's just tools laying out there that you could
Mhm.
just plug and play, and all of a sudden your
Mhm.
e-commerce is now a virtual workshop.
No.
Virtual, not a workshop, virtual retail shop, right? It's no longer about
Yeah.
digital cataloging.
Mhm.
It's now about digital experiences,
Mhm.
and I think that's where brands need to start understanding. You have to
Mhm.
graduate from a digital catalog to a digital experience,
Mhm.
so this way you can be omni-channel by default.
Let's move over to the critique, because I think that some of the ideas that you sort of started to present about, like, sort of sparking this magic and finding ways to, interact with your customers. Like, once you have a lot of ideas, or once you kind of have a foundational element to your e-commerce, running a critique workshop is a really great way to improve on that, or take what you already have and push it forward. So maybe you already have some components of omni-channel integrated into your e-commerce store. You can show people like what's available in store, or you can, have virtual store experiences. And so then the question is, like, what's next? Like, where are we going with this, especially into the AR and AI space? How can we help our customers feel more comfortable in moving through the purchasing experience? Critique workshops are really great for that kind of approach to figuring out what's next. And oftentimes you might want to combine this with another type of workshop. So we can kind of pull from some of the critique elements of, like everybody, like a black hat session where everybody has like kind of a perspective that they're viewing the site through. And then when they come to the workshop, they're there to represent that particular perspective, or doing like a balanced scorecard. So you're kind of looking at, how are we leveling up with our competition? Where are other people moving forward? And just generally gathering feedback from across the organization, I think, is a really great way to kind of identify some either quick fixes or some easy paths forward that, don't require a big scope, or they don't require a huge budget. So you can kind of focus on those things and figure out, where you want to see improvement, or where you want to see growth to your user experience. And then lastly is the prioritization workshop. So we've talked a little bit about that in sort of some of the previous examples, but there's always a case for, having a workshop that maybe you've got a really long backlog, or you've got some customer support data that shows there's like a list of areas where you're having problems on your website and you want to pick one to move forward with. Having a prioritization workshop, you can kind of bring some of that information in. You can have a cross-functional team, and then you can go through some activities where you're ranking features and ideas. You're kind of mapping those up against the service delivery that you're trying to provide to your customer, and then you can build consensus around how to move forward. A lot of times, this is a really great way to have an outside group come in and facilitate a workshop. Like, if you know what your priorities are, but other people don't see it from the same perspective, then sometimes if you have an outside source of authority coming through and setting the stage to help them see why your idea or your particular priority is important, then they'll take it more seriously, or they'll be a little bit more open-minded about engaging with you in this like playful space, so that you can kind of like promote the path forward that you perceive or you envision. And so there are lots of activities that you can do around that. Future state mapping. There are a variety of different matrices that you can fill out. You can kind of prompt discussion around and then get people to give you ideas of things that you can kind of put in so that you can figure out, what is going to be the most efficient path forward for the least amount of money, or where's the biggest bang for our buck. All of those matrices are really great for kind of getting people to actually see what's happening with these ideas.
And I think it's a major factor, right? Because a lot of people go through the process of figuring out the problems, figuring out the solutions, but then they just need a little push, right? You need to push forward. And sometimes, you have so many options to go with, you get stuck, you get paralyzed, that you don't know which decision to jump into. This definitely clarifies that and gives you the push and gives you the priorities to, for the next steps.
Yeah, especially like in UX and customer experience, like there are so many new methodologies and techniques and tools that are kind of constantly being introduced. People can be a little bit hesitant about changing the way that they work or adopting a new framework for working. And so a prioritization workshop can be a really great way to bring that new approach in, get people to experiment with it, and then adopt it more widely. It's hard at work. I mean, I'm guilty of it too, Some weeks I just want to...
The one thing to remember, it takes 21 days to build a habit.
Yeah, right. It's
so
tough.
This is where I call it a support system, right? These workshops are not only to clarify things and not only to move things forward, but you have a support system, that gives you the boost and the confidence to take the next steps, to take the drastic steps of change, break the legacy way of doing things. So I think that's, and it's an outside in look, right? Bring on board a third-party agency to run a workshop. They're coming in completely emotionless. They have no marriage to your product or to your business. And so you have an outside look, in look and a perspective, and you have kind of that cold, hard love, hard love type of approach. You're saying, look, I get it, you're emotionally attached, but this is what's good and this is what's right for the business and for the company.
Definitely. I think as like outsiders, oftentimes you can come in and maybe you have somebody who's like on the front lines, interacting with customers regularly, and they have an idea. And then in the workshop, they're just not being listened to by some of the higher ups. And that's what a good facilitator is there to do, is to kind of break down that imbalance of power, so that if somebody has a really strong idea, it's being presented equally with everybody else's idea. And then you can kind of help that person feel more comfortable speaking up, or if that person has you see that there's somebody who's willing to be an ally for them, you can create a space, an opening for them to express their opinions and their beliefs. I also think just from the outside in component, I see patterns everywhere because I'm working with so many different teams across e-commerce. And oftentimes when you're an in-house team, you just aren't getting that element of like what other people are doing because you're so focused on your own space. And there's a lot of power and importance to that, just understanding like what other patterns are starting to emerge, where is the industry going, and consultants and workshop facilitators, they're really, in agencies, they're all on the front lines of those patterns that are developing. So basically the way that, the workshops are set up at the core, we can do a lot of customization work that we mentioned at the beginning of this recording, but a lot of times what I sort of start with is a 2-hour workshop. So that's a pretty quick flow, but oftentimes, when you see a block of like 2 hours taken off on your schedule, it can be a little bit like, whoa, how am I going to get anything else done that day? So it's kind of starting with a 2-hour workshop, introductions, having teams do like a readout. Maybe you've given them some homework to kind of bring into the workshop, so you get a few minutes to kind of have each team or each cross-functional team member present where they are on the project or what their area of expertise is. Then you kind of introduce a current state discussion. So why are we here? What's working? What's not? And then you do a brainstorm, so you just either as a single group, if it's a small workshop, or in breakout groups, you can send people off into different breakout rooms on Zoom, and you have them kind of develop some really big ideas based on the current state. So whatever the goal is of the workshop to solve, this is where we're going to start with the ideation. And then you come back and you present and prioritize. So you narrow a little bit of a break, and then you kind of do it again. And usually this brainstorming and presenting and prioritizing, it's through the perspective of a particular activity, so we're just not like, okay, here's a question, go off and brainstorm. Oftentimes there's like an element of sketching, or people have been given like a black hat to put on, so they're doing it through the lens of a particular perspective for the project. And then, at the very end, you kind of want to wrap everything up very nicely and spend a couple of minutes just talking about like, what is the next step forward? We've developed the outcomes that we did the outcomes that we have from the workshop match the goal that we started with, or have we ended up in a completely different space? And so you want to just take a moment at the very end of the workshop to have an alignment discussion to kind of figure out where everybody's headspace is. And that agenda kind of follows the double diamond pattern of convergent and divergent thinking. So you discover and then define, and then you develop and you deliver. So the first section of the workshop is really built around answering the question, like, what are the problems? And then the second element of the workshop is like, what are some solutions to the problems that we've previously uncovered? There we go. Now we're done.
Excellent. Thank you so much,
Yeah.
Elaine. This was a phenomenal presentation, and I really enjoyed our conversation, as always.
Yes, thank you.
We can definitely establish these workshops for pretty much any type of business, any type of company.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of different ways that you can set up a workshop like this. It's oftentimes just having a really simple conversation, 30 minutes. What's keeping you up at night is a really great way to start that discussion. And then, we can develop a proposal for.
Start a discussion for some people.
Yeah.
Different things keeping them up at night. But definitely, I think, in reference to brands that are dealing with, for example, digital transformation, and they're kind of stuck and they don't know how to break out, it's definitely something that we can come in and, help them establish, find the tools, find their approaches, find different ways to help them serve their customers. Those brands that do have it, still are operational, still do, fulfillment. We can help them improve conversions, improve user experiences, just improve customer experience altogether.
Yeah.
Then we can always, workshops always work great for ideation, right? People have thoughts, ideas, and they just need, a team of experts, from different industries or different arenas to give them feedback, right? And this is definitely a workshops can be great for that.
Totally.
For discovery of that of those ideas. Thank you so much. If anybody has any questions, please shoot us an email at hello@nanowebgroup.com. And me and Elaine will be doing a lot more of these workshops. And we're happy to do private workshops as well. Thank you, everybody.
Totally.
Stay safe.
Bye.
Bye.